Greetings, welcome to episode 2 of Desert Gardening in Your Backyard in Las Vegas with Doug. So last time we talked about shade, and now we got to talk about dirt, because basically everything starts from the beginning. So if you haven't tried to garden in Las Vegas, the dirt here is crappy. Part of that's because it's mostly rock. There's rocks from the size of this to the size of this, and there's crystals that have formed as if they were rock. The technical term for it is caliche, which means the soil holds almost no water. Well, it's not even soil. The ground holds almost no water. There's almost no dirt. It's mostly essentially just rock that doesn't know it's rock yet. So planting anything in the native soil of Las Vegas is almost impossible. Now, that being said, it's not Vegas that's the problem. It's the dirt. Because I'll show you in a bit when we go outside. I have some grapevines in my backyard that were grown from grapes that I transplanted from a riparian area just outside of town, that although they've dropped in elevation a little bit in order to get here, have no idea that they're not there, because as long as the soil is fine, the climate is okay. That's not a great place to grow things, but it can be done. So anyway, the soil. Basically here, if you're going to have a garden, especially if you're just looking at flowers and vegetables, raised beds all the way. You either need to rip the soil out, or you need to build on top. And since building on top is less work than ripping it out, then there's that. And then, so I have a series of planters in the backyard. The ones nearest to the house are made out of wood, so they're temporary and can be more easily removed if I decide I want to do something else with the middle of the yard besides grow food. And the ones in the back are made out of blocks. Part of that is for flood prevention, because I do back up to a floodplain, so that I've got an additional 24 inches of protection against flood waters coming in through my backyard. The rest of that is because I wanted to have things tiered up so that I had different elevations of growth, so I could put different things in that also had different root requirements. So the blocks and the boards are essentially about 8 inches deep apiece. So the wooden planters are 8-inch and 16-inch. That's one board or two boards high. And then the blocks are 16, 24, 32, and 40 inches, depending on how many blocks have been stacked up. And they can't see the lowest row of blocks because they were embedded in the ground to make them flat, so that the planters would be flat. And then I put decorative landscaping rock around, so it buries about 2/3 of the lowest concourse of blocks. And then I covered about 1/3 of the height with rocks. And I'm talking rocks about the size of a $50. This is for soil percolation, because since the soil doesn't drain, I need the water to go down through the planter and then out of the way so it doesn't rot the roots. Also to drive the water down when I water on the top, so that the roots will follow the water down into the soil and seek the nutrients and the water from there. You'll notice that every time there's a big windstorm in this town, that the trees that fall over are the ones that are shallow rooted. So they may have roots that are 2 meters wide, well, 2 to 4 meters, 2 meters from the trunk, so 4-meter wide root base. But if it's only this deep, then they're not holding onto that much dirt, and the trees will simply fall over. And they'll fall over in a couple of minutes against a 50-mile-an-hour breeze. I don't know what that is in kilometers an hour, but that's okay. We're in America, and it's okay to use American units, right? So I wanted to make the roots go down. I also wanted to give enough space so that when I planted things that were roots, like beets, radishes, carrots, etc., that I didn't end up getting carrots that were this long, or carrots that did this, because I wanted there to be some space for them to grow down. I also wanted to make it possible for things that are rooting and that sprout up somewhere else to go down, across, and then up somewhere else, but not to go between the planter blocks themselves. So each of the planter beds in my backyard that are made out of stone are stone all the way down to the ground. Then there's weed control fabric and then a wall up the other side. So it's not just a facade of blocks on the top where they can just go up and down. It's made the watering more difficult, but that's another story. So then we got to talk about dirt. And you can get dirt from anywhere that you like, but there are things that I need to know about, that you need to know about your dirt. There needs to be a certain amount of organic material. This is a minimum. There also needs to be something for it to breathe. Now, there are two options for that. You can either mix reject playground sand into it, or you can mix vermiculite. And vermiculite has potential carcinogenic properties, and it's an inhalation risk. So I'd use sand because, well, you know, sand is easy to get. You can pick it up when people are finished doing concrete, etc., etc. And basically, I've gotten all my sand for free. So the organic material that I decided to pick was a combination of two things. One is no longer as easily as accessible as it was. My buddy would go by Starbucks every morning and pick up his coffee, and when he would leave, he would also grab the bags of grounds that were there. Starbucks doesn't do that anymore, but I at one point had probably enough coffee grounds to fill the trunk of a standard sedan. So I had all that organic material. And the reason why I wanted coffee grounds is because coffee grounds are acidic in pH, and the ground here that is normal is alkaline. So those are the two different extremes of the pH scale, so that when they finally merge together, or as the soils intermixed and the water moved between them, it would create a more neutral environment, because most nutrients are actually absorbable near a neutral pH. There's some exceptions, but if you want to know about that, you need to take Plant Physiological Ecology. That is ERS 710 at UNR, where I went to grad school. So and then you need to put some actual dirt in. And I'm talking about the general rock soil, because if the plants do reach from whatever you're planting them in into the native soil, you don't want it to be a total shock where they go from, oh my gosh, this soil is so great, to what the hell is this stuff? So in the cases of the trees where they're not in planters and they had to go deeper than the planters, I dug the holes. They're about 1 meter wide and 1 meter deep, and then it's about 1/3 backfilled with native dirt, 1/3 with sand dirt mixture, and 1/3 with the organic material. And what I basically just did is a shovel. I had 3 piles, shovel, and that's how I did about 1/3. So it's more of an art than a science. And when you look at the trees in the backyard, they seem to be just fine, except for the one, but I don't know what happened to that one. But other than that, the trees are fine. Some of them look really good. So, because the dirt here sucks. The dirt here doesn't hold a lot of water. The dirt doesn't drain. So you build your dirt, so you put your rocks in for drainage. And then if you want to, you can put a fine layer of sand in to fill in the holes, because there's going to be a bunch of air in there, and you may not want that. And then you fill the rest of it with your 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 mix up to the depth that you want the dirt to be. Then you need to do a percolation test, and by doing that, that means you soak it, and then you see how long it takes the water to sink down. And if you've done this the way I did, then the water will disappear from the surface within a few minutes, which is what you want, because you want the water to go down to the roots and go somewhere else, and that's why, hence the depth of the planters themselves. So you can make dirt yourself. Oh, the organic material for regular people would be horse manure. Now, horse manure is easy for me to get, because just up the road here to the east, there's a bunch of horse properties. There's a horse boarding farm like a 1/4 mile away, and so I got a bunch from him. He just dropped it in the street one morning. It'll be there around noon. It was here at 6 o'clock in the morning, so I got to shovel it into the back. And it has compressed quite a bit, because as it rots, it will actually compact and sink. So when we go out in the back, you'll see places where it has sunk, and I'll show you the pile from which I'm going to replenish it. Since coffee grounds are not really available anymore, what I'm choosing to do now as a supplement is peat moss. You can get large bales of that from any hardware store, and that's what I recommend. You'll just need to break it off in chunks. You don't need to break it up with your hands so you can spread it in, because it's sort of compact, and it's not very breathable. So you want to make sure that you aerate it, and that when you are putting it on, you're not dumping it right on top of plants, because you'll suffocate them, or that you're tilling it into the soil if there's no plants there. That's also a really good way to mix it in. But the dirt is key. If you do that, you won't need to amend the soil. But if you're looking for basic amendments, here's a couple of things I recommend. When you do your soil initially, it helps, as I mentioned in a previous video, to bury pennies in your yard. The reason for that is that pennies are the cheapest way to amend your yard and protect your plants. The copper jacket on a penny is antifungal. The zinc core of a penny is antiviral. So as the penny degrades into the soil, it literally will cost you pennies to protect your plants against viruses and fungi. Pretty cool, huh? Protecting them against viruses or against bacteria will cost you silver, and silver is not as readily available but there's a way around that too. If you really want to know, let me know, and I will post it in the comments. Otherwise, it's not that big of a deal. Plants don't get that many bacteria, and especially if you're just doing a vegetable garden. So in terms of amendments, what I usually do twice a year, spring and fall. Spring and fall here are February and October. As I buy some Osmocote, however you want to pronounce it. This little pellet fertilizers, and then I just chuck handfuls of it into, like I'm aerating, like I'm seeding a lawn, and then that break down into the soil. I also leave all the rests from the plants when they die, except for corn stalks have to come out, artichoke stalks have to come out, and what's the other thing that has to come out? Oh, if you let carrots go to seed, you have to pull the carrot tops out because they don't go away. Anything else you can leave there, as long as when your tomatoes are done, you don't need to break up the tomato vines, because otherwise they'll just bramble all over the place and cover everything up. So just let everything go back into the soil. Those things don't go back into the soil very well, so I remove them and throw them away. Oh, beets, cauliflower, broccoli, those stalks also need to come out. Just because they don't rot here because it's not wet enough in the air, so they just go hard. Like you've seen that with banana peels and orange peels in the desert. They basically just dry up and get leathery, and they never really go away. Stuff doesn't rot here like it does other places because it's not wet enough here for the fungi to grow on it. You don't want fungus in your garden unless you're trying to grow fungus. The fungus that grows in Nevada naturally is usually either agonistic, which means it's just going to make your life uncomfortable, or it's lethal, in which case then you've defeated the purpose of growing your own food. You might as well just buy it from the store. So gardening in your backyard is more of an esoteric thing, more for bragging rights than it is for feeding yourself in the desert Southwest, especially in the low desert. But we'll go outside now and I'll show you a few things in the garden. All right, so we're outside now, and as promised, a short survey of the trees. So you've seen the trees before if you've seen it in my previous backyard videos. Start here in the corner with the these are the flowering trees that are just there for shade. You go around. This is the larger of my two pomegranate trees and a fig tree, and then that's a Utah native pomegranate on the end there that's perfectly healthy, just hibernating. And then over to this side, here is the apricot tree. So here's some artichokes that don't break down. And here are my lemon trees, here and here. And then there's another shade tree back there. And then a free tree growing here. This is the only one that's died. I really don't know what happened here. I think it just didn't get enough water in the summer. But that's another story, because this has the highest sun exposure, this spot right here. So here are the planters, and if you look at them, you can see that the lowest course of bricks is basically buried underground. And that, I guess these are 6 inches on center a piece. And so this one here right in front of you is going to be an 18-inch deep, so about 6 inches of that are rocks, and then there's 12 inches of dirt. And then I have the grapevine and the blackberries growing in here right now. There will be peas in here later, and the deep roots have enabled them to survive just fine. And you see the soil is wet but not damp. I don't know, it's wet but it's not soggy. It was watered today, so it's still holding moisture really well, and that's really what you want. So now I'm going to show you so here's the dirt pile. This right here in front of you, this is the organic material, so it's mostly horse manure. I don't think there's any I don't see any coffee grounds in it anymore. And this is native. This is the native sand dirt. This has just gotten wet. That's not what it usually looks like. And then this is what my dirt in my yard really looks like naturally. You can see it's chock full of rocks and pretty dry. My soil drains okay, but here's the peat moss, so the brand doesn't really matter. This is probably just what was available at the time, and that's what you mix in, because as you can see, this is a single tomato plant. It's growing in an 8-inch deep wooden planter where only half of this is dirt. and half of it is rocks. So, and then we have a series of the large tomato here, and then these much smaller ones here. Not really sure what that is. They're green right now because they're not getting enough sun exposure and they may never actually ripen, but that's just a hazard. And that's about as big as they get. So, see, you can see there's some, this is freezing damage right here. These are called anthocyanins, this purplish color. There's also some on this other pepper plant, just for reference, since for some reason I decided, let's talk about anthocyanins. So you can see them on this top one on this pepper plant. They're being sold right now as a health thing, and this is how plants fight. Well, plants make anthocyanins when they're going to die. So if you're intending to eat anthocyanins, you're not at death's doorstep, then you're probably doing it wrong. But the point is it doesn't take a lot of dirt, but if the dirt is done correctly, then the plants will grow extremely well. The key is to make sure it drains, to make sure it has the materials in it, to make sure there's enough of it, and then to keep it up. Oh, I forgot to show the sinking. Fine. I'll show you this other side. I have had the tomatoes every year so far. This will go fallow this year from tomatoes anyway. So if you see on the back here, you can see how much the dirt has compacted back here and over here. So I've lost, this is a 2 board deep, so I've lost about 1/3 of its depth. So that's what the peat moss is mostly for. I'll take the peat moss and some of the dirt back here on the back porch and amend it into the garden to bring that up this fall once once the tomatoes freeze. And then I can put something else into it next year. And you rotate stuff so you don't deplete the soil. Since the soil was so good to begin with, I haven't worried about rotating it every year. I don't think you have to rotate it every year, but some rotation is helpful, so you don't have to put a lot of things into it. You'll see that based on this particular paradigm, this is technically organic free-range produce here because there's no chemicals added to the soil. It's just soil. It's rotting organic matter, whether that's horse manure or peat moss or coffee grounds mixed with sand and dirt and put together. And I do bury pennies in it. Pennies are not technically organic or whatever, but they do have protective effects, and I basically just let them rot. Oh, iron nails. Get some actual iron nails, put them in the garden, make sure they're point down because they're going to rust. And so you don't poke yourself with them and get tetanus, which is a bacterial infection from rusty nails. It's usually don't get it underground because it doesn't grow underground. It has an aerobic bacteria, but that will put iron into the soil. One of the things that happens here because of the water's pH is that your iron will be, the soil will not release iron from it. So if you amend the iron, then the plants will be more able to take it up. So you can add some chelate or whatever if you want. That's basically just powderized rusty nails that people have convinced you is artificially messing with your garden. But everything back here is sunshine and water. I did the dirt, I planned for sun, and all I add is sunshine and water, and then I amend the dirt. So there really isn't anything else I have to add. Oh, the other thing that you can do for fertilizer, if you want to be organic and save the whales and stuff, is all the flowers from anything in your yard, take them and keep them and put them in there. Because the flowers flowering requires free phosphates, and phosphates are physiologically unavailable in an alkaline soil environment. You have a very narrow pH range in which the plant can suck them out of the soil. So the flowers have phosphates in them. If you put them back around the plant and let them rot back into the soil, that will restore the phosphates that have been taken from the soil and provide them so that you can continue to flower. If you are not that big on making it organic and disease-free and vegan, humana, all that other stuff that's designed to separate fools from their money, then what you can simply do is go buy some dark cola. Brand is irrelevant. It just needs to be dark and have phosphoric acid in it. The phosphoric acid will be freely available to the plants, which can then take it up. Phosphates will enhance the flowering. So if you have a plant that won't flower, or you have a plant that isn't flowering as much as you want it to, then you can amend the soil with phosphates that way. So I've got my 2 lemon trees out there right now, which have no lemons on them. And I don't know if that's just because this is the lean year, or if it's the year in which they rest, excuse me, or if they're depleted. So what I'm going to do is I forgot to show you the grapevines too. I'm going to amend the soil around one of them with dark cola and see if that forces it to flower in the spring. Because I'm supposed to get 2 crops in the spring and in the fall, so I should have lemons right now. I don't even have any flowers, but it's okay. Life's not giving me lemons, I guess. So one final thing about soil, just to show you, is to show you these 2 grapevines. And keep in mind, it is November. If we took you up into the mountains, you'd see that they're almost entirely hibernating there now. But I'm going to show you the 2 plants that are Vitis riparia, which is a native North American grapevine species. This is the one here in the back. This is the small one. This one has this one gets gypped on water and soil and gets an overload of sun. And then there's this one up here, which is much bigger. They're the same species and they were planted at the same time. And it just goes to show the difference in soil. You've seen this one before. This is Vitis riparia. Okay, and it has very tiny leaves. It also has seeded grapes, so if that's something you're into, it's not as appealing for most people. But this is my other native grapevine. The other 2, if you look back, you can see the leaves. The leaves right here are more spiky and triangular, and these are more rounded. This one's actually brambled over there, so I had to think for a minute before I said anything, because there's leaves over there that you can see, like over on this side, that are actually from this plant. So anyway, if you want stuff to grow that isn't native here, the soil has to be great. Things that are already native, as long as you even remotely approach it, will be fine. One last comment, and that is planters. I like them, with one exception. So I have several of these. I think there's 7 of them. These planter pots that I have, and they're done the same way. If you pull the dirt out of the bottom, there's rocks at the bottom, and there's sand, and there's dirt. And there's probably about this much dirt. I can't see that. This much dirt that they're grown in. The problem with them is, because they're terracotta, is that they get much too warm in the summertime. And a lot of the things that you would want to grow in them don't grow in them. So what do I have in them? That was a hollyhock plant that I didn't plant. It was wild. Some bird dropped it in there, and they let it grow. And then I have 4 pots that have asparagus in them to contain the asparagus, because asparagus is a weed that will spread and take over everything. I had tomatoes in one. I had broccoli in one. And the other 2 had potatoes in them, except for, like I said, it's so hot that the potatoes had already baked. So when I dug them up, they're already black because the starch had already caramelized inside, and the potatoes were already worthless. So I got to find a different way to do that. And that's some of the things we'll be talking about in later videos, is what I did and why, what I learned from it, and what I would do differently in the future in terms of what I plant, where I plant, and when I plant it. So thanks for tuning into this second episode. Have a fantastic day.